Welcome! This will be a video on how to set up notifications in ConnectionsExpert. ConnectionsExpert notifications can be used to send email alerts to people or users about activity taking place in IBM Connections, and it's fully configurable to be triggered by anything that happens. For instance, you could set up a notification to community owners of communities that have not seen activity in the last X number of months or weeks, asking them whether or not the community still needs to remain existing or perhaps could be cleaned up. Another way of using notifications could be to get alerted about the fact that certain users might be running close to their quotas, so that you can proactively give them more quota or talk to them about what they are storing in Connections. Now, the notification I'm going to set up today is one that is related to policies. Many organizations have a policy that require at least 2 community owners to every community. But how do you safeguard this? How do you manage this? There is no way to do this in Connections itself. ConnectionsExpert can help here. What you do is you set up a notification that tests whether or not a community has only 1 owner, and then if that's the case, sends an email to that community owner asking him or her to add another community owner. So let's see how we do that. To set up notifications, open ConnectionsExpert and first of all, set up your email profile settings. This is a one-time only action, but is required before you can send out emails. Also make sure that you are aware that this email address will be used as the sender for all notifications that you send out. So make sure that it is something that has an active mailbox behind it, or that is a do not reply address if you don't want people to be able to reply to that. Once you've set up your email profile settings, you can start setting up your notifications. As you can see here, I already set up a couple of notifications. Each line represents 1 notification, and I can click through them to see what the different queries are that are being used. Now, the thing that is done here is that each notification is based on a selection of data that ConnectionsExpert collects, and that is done in so-called queries. Now, what I have to do now is to set up one of those queries to be used as the basis for my notification. And in this case, my query should give me all the communities with the community information. So how do I do that? You open Data Miner, which is a separate tool provided with ConnectionsExpert, where you can have multiple queries. As you can see, there's multiple here, and a query consists out of an SQL statement querying a certain table in your ConnectionsExpert database. You might not know which database tables there are, so to see that, simply click here in the right upper corner and use the database schemas to get an overview of what is available. As you can see, there's multiple tables here with events, with community information, with activity overviews, and also with file library, item information, and profile information. So there's lots of different information. And each of those tables then holds fields about that information. So if I look at the table holding all the community information, I can see that there is a field called name, holding the name of the community, what type of community it is, if it's an internal or an external community, and also information about the owners. So in this case, we wanted to know all communities where only 1 owner was, and I see here that there is a field called owners count and a field called owners email, which I can both use for my email notification. So to build this query, I simply copy the table name and then go back to my Data Miner view and put it in editor mode. This will give me extra options, including the option to create a new query. I provide a name for the query. And I specify my query. Now, this is SQL. You might not be well versed in this. If so, you can always ask other people for help, or we can also assist if necessarily. But the most basic query that you do is that you say, give me everything from a certain table. And we already found that all the information that we needed is in this table. So simply saying select star from this table will give me all the information I need. Now, the only other thing I need to do now is to make sure that ConnectionsExpert knows that it can use this query for my notifications by setting this toggle, and to save it. And that's all. So I now have my query. I can test my query by simply running it and showing it up as a grid, so that I can go through and see whether or not indeed I have the community's name and all the other information like the owner count and the owner's emails, which is indeed what I get. And then I can go back to ConnectionsExpert to set up my notification. Do keep in mind that once you've set up a new query, you need to do a refresh before you actually can use it. So I just refreshed my screen and now I click Create New. In the first step, I will now select that query that we just built, so the demo community owners, and I can then re-inspect all the columns that we get, which includes owner's count and owner's email, which is exactly what we needed. I then go to the next step, and this is important because the query that I did will give me every community back that is in Connections. Now I only want to send this email to communities with one owner. So if I don't select a condition, this mail would be going out to every owner of every community in my environment, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to select that owner's count field and say that it needs to be equal to 1. Because that's what I want to see, only communities where there's one owner. In the next step, I then select the email address. Now I can select hard-coded addresses that I can use. So I could, for instance, say, send this email not to the community owners themselves, but maybe to a central community manager. Or I can select a field from my table. And in this case, we have that email field, that owner's email field. So I will use that. But just a little tip from my end here. If you're setting this up for the first time, never use the actual owners or users emails to do a first run. Because if anything is wrong, you might be sending out hundreds or thousands of mails doing this. So always test first by selecting your own name as a hard-coded address, then see what happens once you run it. And then when you are happy with this and satisfied with the results, change it back to the actual field holding the real email addresses that you want to send it to. Now in the next step, I have to specify what text I want in my email. Now what I can do here is interesting because I want to include in this title the name of the community, because some people might be owner of multiple communities and I want to make really sure that they immediately get what this email is about. So I enter my text here, and now I can use that same table, that query that we just used, to get information about my community. So in this case, name is one of the fields here that I can then include as a variable. And as you can see, it included that simply by selecting it and editing to subject as a field in my email. And I can do the same with the rest of my email as well. So let's just finish my email. I want to include my name here as well of the community. And in this case, I also want to include another field, which is the community URL field. Why do I want to include that? Well, it helps users to understand where they need to go, and they don't have to now look up the community, but simply click on the URL that I'm providing them within the email to go to their community. I finish my email off and I'm done. Now, as you can see, I can use many other fields in here, and depending on your query, you can add even more information here. So really, it's all up to you what you select as your query and how you build your queries, what you can use in your emails. In the next step, I will now set the notification interval. In this case, I would like to send this email once every week on Sunday night so that they get alerted and need to take action, but they don't have to take action within like 15 minutes to prevent getting another email. In this case, I give them a week to change it. If they don't change it, next week they will get another email. And then I finish my query. So I can set a name here, demo policy alert. And I can make it active to ensure that it's actually running, and then save my setting. And here it is. So I can simply read through it again. It's called Demo Policy Alert. It's based on my query called Demo Community Owners. It runs every Sunday night at midnight, and it notifies if the owner's count field from this query is 1. And then it sends out an email with this subject to all the people contained in the owner's email field. And that's all. Now I've set up my query, now I've set up my notification profile, and now this email will be sent out every Sunday night to all the community owners of communities with only one owner. To show you how this would look, this is an email that I sent earlier with the same configuration, and as you can see, the person gets a personalized email with their community name and their URL in it. And you could even go further and personalize things like the name by joining the profiles table to this query, and then you can get the name of the actual owner so that you can literally input any information in here that you might find interesting. I hope that this helps you setting up your notifications, and in case of questions, don't hesitate to contact us through support@panagenda.com. Thank you.